and welcome back to the channel. I am about to make a road trip down to Washington, D.C., where I am going to be meeting with Brother Maynard Edwards at the Scottish Rite Temple. You know, as we drive through New Jersey by the Meadowlands complex, can't help but think of one very important player in our story about the history of Huguenot Lodge. He will be featured in an upcoming episode, but he played a somewhat minor role in the story. However, he played a very major role in the history of New Jersey. So you'll just have to keep tuning in to figure out who that was and what the story is all about. So I just pulled into the Richard Stockton service area. Now, Richard Stockton was actually one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence, and he was actually tortured and killed by the British for his treason. He had married Annie Boudinois, who was a descendant of French Huguenots, and one of their daughters went on to marry Benjamin Rush in 1776. So here we have a little bit of American Revolutionary War history that didn't even anticipate when I took this journey. So as I cross into Delaware over the Delaware Memorial Bridge, can't help but think about Colonel John Hazlitt and Brother David Hall, who fought so valiantly on Chatterton's Hill at the Battle of White Plains. And I'm just struck by the fact that these gentlemen marched all the way from Delaware in a day where they didn't have modern hiking boots. You know, probably quite a few of them were barefoot at times, and it was a brutal existence, I'm sure. So we just crossed the border into Maryland, and of course Mordecai Gist and the Immortal 400 come to mind as we're driving through the state. We're definitely getting closer to DC, and I'm certainly looking forward to meeting the brothers there. Okay, so we just pulled into Washington. We're maybe 15 minutes away from the Scottish Rite Temple. We'll be there shortly. You can see off in the distance the Washington Monument. So we made it. This is absolutely one of the most beautiful Masonic buildings in the world, and let's go inside and meet the brothers.
So this is the temple room, and this room was purpose-built for the Supreme Council to hold their public meeting every 2 years that we call the biennial session. So the Supreme Council members would sit at these desks here. There are 33 Supreme Council members, and then obviously in the east and in the west, it's the Grand East over there where the Grand Commander would sit, and while they're having their public meeting, the other folks are in here, and it's an audience, and they can watch. And so Scottish Rite members and ladies and whomever else is invited can sit in here and watch. And again, they had this every 2 years. Originally, they held it in October, and then it was moved into August. We no longer use the temple room for the public biennial session for a couple of reasons. The first thing is, when they moved it to August to basically accommodate people's summer travel schedule, what happened was it's really hot in this room because this room is not air conditioned. It predates air conditioning, and just based on the size of it, it's cost prohibitive to put air conditioning in here. But secondly, the Supreme Council and the Scottish Rite has swollen to such a great size, everybody doesn't fit. We usually get about 1,200 people in for the biennial session, and that many people won't fit in here. The last time I was in here for anything that it was packed, it was during my 33rd degree conferral, which they did a little bit of it in here, and then the rest of it we actually went up the street to the Valley of Washington, D.C. and received the 33rd degree there. So it's a really neat room. It's a wonderful room. A couple of Blue Lodges do use it, but generally at this point it's just a showpiece with some really unique features.
So it's Washington's funeral Bible?
Mm-hmm. This was used by his lodge to do his Masonic service at the funeral.
Wow.
This is the very first ever known to exist 33rd degree Scottish Rite patent. So when a Scottish Rite Mason becomes a 32nd or a 33rd degree, he gets what's called a patent. He gets a document that says he is official, and every Scottish Rite Mason gets one of these. So if you're a 32nd, you get one of those. If you're a 33rd, you will get one of those to replace that. And this is the very first ever 33rd degree Scottish Rite patent from 1801. It was given to a guy named Frederick Dalco. It was Reverend Frederick Dalco. He was a Methodist minister, and he'd done a lot of work during the Revolutionary War. And what this says is that he was a 33rd degree Mason conferred by the Supreme Council of the Ancient Accepted Scottish Rite in 1801 in Charleston, South Carolina. What's fascinating about it is not just what the document represents, but this is a hand-drawn document, and the detail work on it is so unbelievable. It's really tough to get pictures of. Obviously the lights are dim in here to preserve the documents, but if you look at the double-headed eagle on this document, the irises have pupils in them. So like they used a single human hair to dot the eyes and make it that perfect. The flag and the other emblems on here are just so perfectly well done. It's just a remarkable piece of history, but this is the very first 33rd degree Scottish Rite Mason's patent right here. This cabinet has some really awesome artifacts in it. So there's a guy, I'm going to call him the Albert Pike of the North. That's not a one-to-one analogy, but I'm he was important to the Scottish Rite of the Northern Masonic jurisdiction in much the same way that Albert Pike was important to the Southern jurisdiction. His name was Giles Fonda Yates, and he was a very prolific and very important Northern Masonic jurisdiction Scottish Rite Mason. This was his apron, and it is probably the most extraordinary apron I've ever seen. Aprons were ornate, but they were very ornate in that they were hand-drawn. So this is hand-drawn on here, and this I know works because I do it all the time, because if you look, like the different columns of masonry, those are the 5 orders of architecture. But I mean, look how small it is, but then you zoom in on it and you can see, you know, and all the different emblems, the person standing in the doorway, there's letters above the doorway, and just standing here looking at it with our naked eye, we can't really see that lettering. So somebody by hand in the 19th century, in the mid-1800s, drew this, and how they did it is just a miracle.
Is there writing on the other door too?
Which door?
Right there.
Yeah. Both of them. Yep. There's writing.
Wish I read Latin.
Me too. And there's crack. You know, they've drawn cracks and tiles.
The detail's unbelievable.
Yeah. There's a cable tow right there. And again, just looking at it with your naked eye, it's tough to see. But when you zoom in, you can really see a lot of the detail. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. And then this is Albert Pike's personal copy of Morals and Dogma. So we don't know that it was the actual very first copy he ever wrote out, but this was one of the earliest copies, and this was the one that he carried around with him.
I just want to take a moment to thank Brother Maynard Edwards for his wonderful hospitality here at the House of the Temple in Washington, D.C. We also appreciate all the support he's given the YouTube efforts of Huguenot Lodge number 46. Now, if you have not checked out the Southern Jurisdiction Scottish Rite's YouTube channel that Brother Maynard Edwards runs, you are really missing out. It's top-notch. It's definitely some of the finest YouTube Masonic-related content put out. There is a link in the description below, and I encourage you to visit that channel and watch some of the videos. They're really outstanding. We are in what's known as Lafayette Square in Washington, D.C., directly in the shadow of the White House. Now, in this square are several statues of very prominent men who played large roles in the American Revolution. Directly behind me is that of General Rochambeau, who not only played a very large role in the history of the American Revolution, he also played a large role in that conflict in Westchester County. Flanking the statue of General Rochambeau, also overlooking the White House, is the statue of none other than Masonic brother Albert de Motier, or more famously known as the Marquis de Lafayette. Now, Lafayette was very much a believer in Masonic philosophy. He was a very active Masonic brother. In fact, he gave a Masonic medal to Brother General Nathaniel Greene, and Greene wore that medal throughout the American Revolution. Now, Albert de Motier, or Marquis de Lafayette, was born a noble in France His family wasn't overly wealthy, but he did finance his trip here because he was a true believer in the cause, and he fought bravely and very effectively throughout the American Revolution. In some ways, he was General Washington's right-hand man. In 1824, Marquis de Lafayette returned to the United States in preparation for the celebration for the upcoming 50th anniversary of the American Revolution. He toured the country, and wouldn't it be wonderful if we found out that he actually visited Huguenot Lodge in 1824? Directly in the center of Lafayette Park is the statue of Masonic brother and former President Andrew Jackson. Now, Jackson and his brother both served in the American Revolution, and they were both injured. Their mother nursed, or tried to nurse them both back to health. Unfortunately, she was unsuccessful in Andrew's brother's case. This experience inspired her to serve on a British hospital ship to help other wounded soldiers survive the war. Unfortunately, she got very ill during that experience and passed away. And at the age of 14, Andrew Jackson was left an orphan. Now, this whole experience further embittered Jackson toward the system of royalty that the British Empire worked under, and forever after that, he was a bitter enemy of that system. Behind the statue of Marquis de Lafayette is the statue of General Tadeusz Kościuszko. Now, if you're a native New Yorker, you most likely recognize that name from the Kościuszko Bridge that was named in his honor. Now, Kościuszko was a military man that was born in Poland, and he came here to serve under George Washington during the American Revolution. He was an engineer by background, and he played a very important role in fortifying West Point as well as the positions in Saratoga. It is thought that he was a Masonic brother, but there is no hard evidence that he was. There are Masonic lodges named in his honor. Directly behind the statue of General Rochambeau is the statue of Baron von Steuben. Now, Baron von Steuben was a Masonic brother, and there is a lodge in Lee Center, New York, named in his honor. A very interesting character. He kind of pumped up and maybe exaggerated his background a little bit. However, he was a very highly skilled military man from the Prussian army, and he went on to become a major general under George Washington. The most important role he played in the Continental Army is that he relentlessly drilled the army at Valley Forge and made them into a highly effective fighting force, as opposed to the kind of ragtag bunch of recruits they were before that. All 5 of these men played a role in the American Revolution, 4 of which played very major roles, so they are special to our history. Without their contributions, we'd probably still be a colony under the British Empire and not the constitutional republic we are today. Sadly, these statues, or at least some of them, were recently vandalized, and I do not understand that. It's a very tragic thing. How these statues became vandalized when they're directly across the street from arguably the most secure building in the world, the White House, with Secret Service people all around here, it just blows my mind and makes me very sad. I am standing in front of the White House in Washington, D.C. Now, it was President George Washington that oversaw the construction of this house, and according to the Grand Lodge of Scotland, he insisted that they bring operative stonemasons from Scotland who are also Masonic brothers to construct this house. Directly behind me is the Washington Monument. This was obviously dedicated to the memory of Most Worshipful Brother General and President George Washington. The cornerstone for this building was laid in 1848 by Most Worshipful, then sitting Grand Master Mason of Washington, D.C., Benjamin French. In the building, there are 22 stones that were donated by various Grand Lodges throughout the country and individual lodges. Outside, adorning the building, is Tuckahoe marble. Now, this marble was sourced from Tuckahoe, New York, the home of Marble Lodge number 702, which is one of Huguenot 46's ancestral lodges that merged into us many years ago. So this is the end of my weekend here in Washington, D.C. I've had the privilege of visiting with several Masonic brothers, as well as visiting some great Masonic-related sites related to some of the founding fathers of our country. And it caused me to reflect on this point. Now, the Founding Fathers, many of whom signed the Declaration of Independence, were Masonic brothers. Key people such as George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, Marquis de Lafayette, etc. I mean, the list is pretty long. All these men sat through Masonic Lodge, they learned their lessons through their degrees, etc. They were exposed to Masonic philosophy, and this was very influential in the founding of our country and our system of government. Now, this tradition served us well, as there have been many, many Masonic brothers that served in various federal and state and local positions of government throughout the years. All these brothers received a Masonic education in Lodge through their degrees and etc. The last sitting president that was a Masonic brother was 50 years ago, Gerald Ford. In that time, social organizations such as Freemasonry, churches, etc., have all experienced a severe decline in membership. So that means there have been fewer and fewer people in politics in positions of power that have been exposed to the same Masonic lessons that our Founding Fathers have. I will let you decide whether our country is better off for that or worse off over the past 50 years.